Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes. Welcome to Everything Co-op. You know, we are just a few days before the election. And last week, I talked about the comparison of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump against the ethical values of cooperation, which are honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. And that turned out to be a great conversation, very interesting. Particularly, I used the fact check of their one and only debate. And that got to be extremely interesting of who was telling truth and who wasn't. And today, we're going to continue on this getting ready for the election. We have Dr. Diane Kern with us today and Valarie Davis. And they're with the group Being Well While Black. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So why don't we start with you, Dr. Kern, or can I call you Diane?
Diane, please.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm not your therapist right now.
Okay. Tell us about your background, Dr. Kern, Diane. Tell us about your background. Where'd you go to school? Where'd you grow up? How did you become a psychotherapist?
Yes. Well, growing up, I always had a curiosity about people, about what motivates us to do what we do and how we feel. And so it always led me to want to work with people, want to help people. And eventually I learned about the profession of psychology. And so literally from my undergraduate degree at Boston University, that was in psychology. I came to DC to go to graduate school where I earned my PhD in clinical psychology. And I worked for 15 years in DC public schools as a school psychologist. However, that was not my original intent. And in the early 90s, I shifted gears and got licensed and went into private practice as a psychotherapist.
Okay.
So currently, I'm licensed in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I also have a wellness program called Happy and Healthy You, with the tagline, Learn to Love Life and Live Well, through which I offer workshops, presentations, consultations around, I'm so sorry, I came down with something, around stress management issues.
That was love to learn life, love to...
Learn to love life and live well. Is my tagline, but it's happy and A-N-D, healthy you, the letter U. So that's the website, www.happyandhealthyu.
All right, I can get
some. And I'm so sorry, I came down with a nasty sinus infection.
You and I both. Happy and healthy you. Okay, I can use some of that. All right. And where'd you go to school here? Where'd you get your PhD? What school? There's about 100 of them in
Catholic
DC.
University.
Catholic, okay. All right.
Yes. So that's why. And so that, again, my love of people and desire to empower people around their health and wellness.
And where did you grow up?
Oh, I grew up in first part of my childhood, Cleveland, Ohio, and then we relocated to Syracuse, New York.
Okay.
And so coming here to DC in '76 after graduation was like coming to Mecca. I'm telling you, it was a wonderful cultural experience.
Yes.
Because I went to school at Boston University, so coming from those environments, and unfortunately at that time when I graduated, there was a lot of tension, racial tension in Boston because of the desegregation of the schools in South Boston, of all places. And so trust me, when I came here and saw the presence of Black people on the level that we were functioning, I was thrilled, and I loved DC. I stayed. Yeah, this is home. This is home, man.
All right. I have the same experience. And Valarie, what about you? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
I grew up mostly in Silver Spring, Maryland, but I was born in the Bronx, New York. My dad was a preacher, and so he went where the denomination sent him and where the spirit was. So I have two sisters. One was born in Toledo, Ohio, where we used to live, and one was born in North Carolina. So we've been various places on the East Coast and the Midwest. But my parents, my family on both sides, they're rooted in Mississippi, segregated Mississippi. And so what runs through me is this innate call for justice and humanity. I'm a boomer, even though I have a 17-year-old daughter. So I cross four of these generations, whatever they are, X, Millennial, Y, ABC, 1, 2, 3. I don't know what they are. But it keeps me involved in what's happening in the lives and the minds of young folk around what's right, particularly Black people. What's right, what's good, what's a priority for them, but also older generations, my generation, who can remember when Black people very easily came together for the collective good. So I spent most of my formative years, we initially moved from New York City to DC and then to Silver Spring, Maryland, when I've been here since the third grade in Montgomery County, Maryland. And I went to Boston University also, and I was a finance major. At that time, I thought I was going to be some big-time banker and be in international banking, and didn't even do enough research to figure out they didn't have that major at my school. So international finance came off the list, and it became finance. I realized I didn't want to do it. I didn't like numbers that much in banking. So I went and got my MBA from the University of Michigan in marketing and started out in advertising and brand management, only to discover I didn't care that much about detergent and selling things. Ended up at leaving there and going to Ernst & Young, where I found my true gift was being a problem solver and being able to see things that other people can't see yet and figure out how to win in a variety of environments. And then I finally ended up at Fannie Mae because I fell in love with this concept of more Black people owning homes as a source of wealth and freedom. And then I got to a point where I understood I had gotten all I needed to get out of other people's companies and started my own. So I've had several businesses on the for-profit and the also nonprofit entities. And all the thread that runs through them is humanity and justice. And to a large extent, centering and elevating the voices of Black people, particularly in spaces where folks don't want to hear from us and don't want to hear from us in ways that they perceive to be demanding or confrontational or aggressive. We don't look at ourselves that way, but we are in a state of emergency as Black folks. Diane and I agree on that. So that's where Being While Black came from. Not just out of a public emergency during the pandemic, but realizing that when you look at any of the social determinants of health, from money to education to mental health to access to insurance to transportation to climate impacts, Black folk are in a state of emergency. And my mama told me, when it's an emergency, you should act like it. Absolutely. So I don't come with, the soft voice and the suggestive tone. I come with demands. And we all know the quote about how power doesn't cede power.
That's right.
Without a demand. So that's how I got to where I am. It was not a straight path. And I'll say for anybody who's listening who imagines that people get on the radio and do important things because they knew it from the time they were 8 years old. You've just heard our stories, right? Mm-hmm. But we are centered in our gift and our assignment. And both of us are women of faith. And so we walk where we can't see yet. And when it comes to what we do in terms of political activation and vision for Black people, we don't see it yet, but we're walking in it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to piggyback on
before you piggyback, just I want to follow up. Valarie, you didn't mention you got a JD somewhere in there. You mentioned an MBA.
That's true. Oh, right. So I went to Fannie Mae, right? And I already had my MBA. Okay. And Fannie Mae at that time was one of it was a Fortune 50 company. It had the second Black CEO, Frank Raines, in all of the Fortune 50, only after Ken Chenault and American Express. And they introduced this program where they were making so much money. They said anybody who works for us can go to school for free. You pick the degree. We don't care what it is. Go get a dental degree, get a doctorate, get a medical degree. And I thought to myself, well, what is it that I want to know that I don't know yet? And I don't want to be a doctor or a dentist. So I said, let me go figure out this law thing. Because I happened to be in a legal wrangling situation with my condo association because I had water in my building. And I didn't understand why they seemed to know more than I knew about the documents. And I said, never again. So I went to school part-time at night, 5 nights a week, while working in the office of the chairman as director of corporate strategy at Fannie Mae. I was killing myself, but it was fascinating. I never wanted to practice. I just wanted to be in a room where people knew I knew as much as they did. So yeah, I went to Georgetown, got my law degree at night with, people who were in their 20s, and I was not in my 20s trying to finish that degree.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
I got the JD, a lot of alphabets, but at the beginning and end of the day, it's about operating in your gift and your calling. And the alphabets are nice. But you know what? Discipline beats academics and motivation any day. The discipline of doing whatever it is you're assigned to do, whether you feel like it or not, whether you see the result or not.
Absolutely.
Sound like an amen. And Diane, you were going to follow up.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up. I'm glad. And of course, as you see, that tells you something about Valarie, right? That she is dedicated and definitely determined to use her gifts. And that's what I wanted to follow up on. She mentioned that we're women of faith. And that is true because I grew up in a tradition in my family, particularly on my mother's side of the family, of a spirit of generosity. And they were true believers, and they believed in exercising their love of people in a way that you use your gifts. You use your time, your talent, your treasures that God has blessed you with, to be a blessing to others, essentially. And so, again, one of the things that Valarie and I coalesce around is our mutual sense of social justice, recognizing the ills of society and how they have disproportionately negatively impacted Black people. And then wanting to see those situations change and realizing, just as she said, that we have the faith of the size of a mustard seed. Mm-hmm. We realize things can happen when you step out there, when you truly put your faith in God. But faith is not dead. Faith is an inactive process. Faith is active. Faith is a verb. It's about stepping up and doing something. So that is where our sense, and particularly, I have a very strong sense of the need to empower people, sharing information with people, and letting people know their own strength, helping people get in touch with what they can do, which also relates to our work around, the social activism and political activism and political engagement. In other words, letting people know where their power lies. Right. And that they can exercise their power. Right.
So you mentioned a mustard seed. You guys are going to move a mountain then, okay? You got the faith of a mustard seed.
Oh, we've moved many already.
Uh-oh.
That's right.
Absolutely. Let me tell you something. First of all, we're going to talk about these Black voter guides, right? When we got together initially, and Diane's better at the history of this than I am, during quarantine, during the pandemic, and started what was called a Good Grief series. I think I called Diane one day, and I said, Diane, something is wrong with me. I was like, I don't know what is wrong with me, but I can't get myself together. I used to be able to do 27 things in a day. I'm doing 2.5. I'm, weepy. What is wrong with me? I mean, I'm at home with my child. She's downstairs on the computer doing her little 9th grade stuff. And yeah, we're all scared about I said, what is wrong? And she said, it's grief. And I said, I haven't lost anybody yet. Nobody's died, because I had a very, literal understanding what she meant by that. And then we started talking about loss and all the things that quarantine and the pandemic caused us to lose.
Yes.
And then we said, well, we can't be alone in this. Let's call the community together to talk about it. And so back to your point about moving a mountain, imagine, 2 Black women shut up in their houses who imagine that they're going to get some broad community of Black people who are also grieving and downtrodden to jump on a Zoom when we're still trying to figure out what Zoom is and talk about our grief. That was a mustard seed.
Amen. Now, did you all meet at Boston University? So
No.
you all knew how to call each other or something?
No.
How did Valarie? How did you?
Talking about community, Veronica Cooper.
Yeah.
Veronica, there was this sister, Veronica Cooper, who used to own a coffee shop. I'm sorry, what was the name of the coffee shop?
Culture Coffee.
Yes, Culture Coffee. And at that time, it was located at the corner of Riggs Road and kind of where South Dakota Riggs, right next to the Walmart. I'm not trying to advertise for them, of course, but just for a point of context. But she would host these wonderful forums for Black women in particular to come together to promote businesses and entrepreneurial ideas and whatnot. So that's how Valarie and I first met. And so we kind of gelled, and Valarie actually initially served as my book coach. I wrote my first book, Go Forward to Work, How to Get Your Right Fit Job During the Pandemic. It was through Valarie's very able assistance that I went from never being an author of other than articles to actually publishing a digital book. So that's how we first came together, and we stayed in touch. And it was during that time, I think I published the book back in like January, February of 2020. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was, we were actively working on it then. Yeah. That's right, because it was during the pandemic. And so that was why we were connected in the first place. We were already in touch with each other, and then bam, we had come together as a result of that forum. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and we had started working together by that time.
So you all decided to get together, and I think the word says take time to grieve.
Take time, but not just to take time to grieve, but to offer, again, this is where we do the two things that, we were both referring to, and that is to give to the community. In other words, to empower people as well as to work through some things ourselves, in other words, to give people an experience. And so to educate, empower people. And so the Good Grief series was our initial effort, which was a 4-part virtual program whereby we dealt with the loss, as Valarie indicated. We talked about the loss of finances, the loss of faith, meaning the loss of a faith in the future, because at that time, it was so early in the pandemic, people were so afraid. We didn't know what was going to happen. We had no idea. So we're talking about what April, May of 2020. Mm-hmm. This was shortly after the pandemic began. We talked about the loss of healing and health. And then, in terms of people were literally dying. People we knew had died. I know we lost a lot of church members. And then we talked about the loss of family and friends. The connection, not being able to have the freedom to interact with people the way we were accustomed to, and to have that physical closeness that we were accustomed to and had taken for granted. And now we had lost that in that moment. And so being able to speak to that, to help people understand what they were going through so that they didn't feel like they were losing their minds, and to enable them to build the hope that they could overcome, and to provide the tools to heal. So we invited experts in. I have a friend who's a grief counselor who works with hospice. And she's a minister. So she came in and she worked around this whole issue of grieving the loss of friends and family, also grieving the loss of people who actually had passed away. Valarie knew an epidemiologist who came in with the statistics around this health issue. I mean, we dealt with somebody in the financial arena who talked about the loss of jobs and how, that was impacting people, Black folks in particular. And again, we're talking about strategies. What kind of strategies can we bring to the table to help us get through this, to help us manage, to help us be okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now you go from good grief to what? What's next after you all do the good grief piece? Did you go straight into being well while Black?
We sure did.
Yeah.
Yeah, because after we finished the good grief, we realized, wait a minute, this was great. I mean, people responded well. I think that helped too. that we had gotten such positive response, and we realized the need was there, as Valarie indicated earlier, that as Black folks, we were in a crisis. You know that whole saying that when white America catches a cold, Black folks catch pneumonia?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's real. That whatever impacts folks negatively, just put an exponent on it for us. And so we realized that wasn't, it was useful, but it wasn't enough. Okay, that really was the call for us to do something on an ongoing basis. And so that's when the whole notion of being well while Black was born. And I remember thinking, it's kind of a riff on that term driving while Black, So again, because I'm in the health field and I promote well-being, I thought, wait a minute, let's make this a positive aim, and let's come up with a title that inspires people to be well while being Black. In other words, in spite of all of the challenges, all of the difficulties we face, all of the oppression, you name it, we can still find ways to be well and inspire. So that was kind of the notion that occurred to me, and Valarie was right on board with it. In fact, and so we both, again, one of the things that I have always appreciated about Valarie was that, the synergism between the two of us. And this is a good example of that. And I truly believe God put us in each other's path.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, when we were doing the Good Grief series, we didn't have an idea that we were going to go beyond the Good Grief series. It wasn't, that was the little mustard seed we had. And, people kept coming. We're talking about 50 and 75 and 100 people on a Zoom that we don't know from across the United States, even outside the United States, who were just happy to have a safe space to process their grief, but also to get strategies about how to get through it. And then we had a lighter component that we added to being well while Black. So we shifted into purposeful action when we established being well while Black. And the election was coming up, and we thought, what is it that we can get together around that's productive, that can make us feel like we can make a difference, but also taps into something we were already going to have to do, which is to vote. And that's how we took the broad definition of wellness, from financial to psychological, from familial to, physical, and said in all of these ways we want to be well. And from where we sit, it begins at the ballot box, because that's the one place we can all be equal. And it was heavy, right? And in fact, we lost some folks, because once we moved forward to be purposeful around something that seemed political, you have predictable peeling off of people that may have just wanted to enjoy that safe space, right? And to connect. We stayed in community because the email list kept growing. They got everything we talked about. And we also had a lighter component called the lounge, where we invited Black joy into the space. So we had a poet who came and not only recited poetry, but helped us write our own poetry to express ourselves. We had a gentleman who was a fashion expert who said, bring these things out of your closet and I can show you how to be the baddest thing walking, even in quarantine. We had a musician who came and led us through, the power of music to heal and to express itself. So we had this element called the lounge as well. And then, when we shifted to being well while Black, 3 things happened. One is we insisted upon redefining, as Diane said, our space in this crisis of the pandemic in a positive way. Mm-hmm. Grief is one thing. Strategies to overcome it and cope with it, another thing. But we went in on now what are we going to do to change the fundamentals that were there before the pandemic? The other piece was that we weren't afraid to take on the politics of it. I grew up, and you all probably grew up with, the saying that 2 things you don't talk about are religion and politics. Well, we had to talk about religion and politics, because faith was what was going to get us through, and politics were going to determine if we were going to continue to be in crisis. So we weren't afraid to take that on. But it wasn't, if you'll recall that election, right? It was unprecedented in its import, in its impact, in our understanding of how the political landscape had changed. And frankly, people's faith in the party that Black people have always supported, and those who mean us nothing but harm. So it was, we talked a lot about the taking of sides and the taking of positions, and where we decided to stay was in the guiding people to understand what's at stake. Mm-hmm. And that's where our voter guides came from. You take the position you want to take, but we insist that you vote smart. Yes. And to be smart, that means we expect Black people to jump in to read, to understand, to have a shared knowledge of the state of Black people, where it is that you live, and then to say what your priorities are and make people who want your vote respond to them. And that's where the Voter Guide Project was born.
Absolutely. Yes. And again, to invite people, encourage people, and educate people around their political rights. This is still, thank goodness, a democracy. That you, as you said, your vote is your voice. As Valarie is wonderful at saying, your vote is what equalizes you. We're all equal at the ballot box. And so that's your opportunity. So to help people who have been disaffected and disillusioned to really see their power and how the system works, to see that's part of our education too. That's part of what goes beyond the guide itself, is to help people understand our political process and how they can actualize their power within it.
Right.
So I'm sitting over here a little disappointed, angry, hurt. I didn't find out anything about this as I was sitting at home in 2020, 2021, okay, feeling, I wouldn't have thought it was grief that I was feeling, but it was something. I used to do yoga 5 times a week before that, and then I'm down to 0, so I'm not active at all. Yeah. I think I aged 20 years in those 3 years. And I wish that Valarie had used her advertising stuff to get the word out where it could reach me. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, well, all that comes down to, as they say, the ducats, the bag. And we started with nothing.
0.
I got it.
That's the mustard seed we were talking about.
Right, mustard seed. So word of mouth was it.
We are going to take a break, and when we come back, the good thing is I'm hearing about you all now, so I can get involved. We're going to talk more about being well while Black and the Black Voter Guide. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial.
News Talk 1450 WOL AM, where information is power.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oaks, and the program is Everything Co-op. And we have our guest that we've been having a wonderful conversation with is Dr. Diane Kern and Valarie Davis, JD, MBA, ABC, and XYZ. Okay. We've been having a wonderful conversation about the pandemic and the grief that one found and lived through with the pandemic, and the work that they did in coming together and forming Good Grief and some programs about how to handle your grief and strategies. And from that, they created a Being Well While Black. And from that, they got the Black Voter Guide. And we want to talk about the Black Voter Guide. But before we do that, I'd like to know a little bit more about Being Well While Black. Okay. Is it physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, spiritually? I mean, being well.
Yeah, all of that, Mr. Oaks, and more. I mean, it's in every aspect of our being, our living, any arena of our lives where it's important for us to be in touch with and mindful of and deliberate and intentional about living and behaving in ways that promote our wellness. And then reaching out, and one of the roles that Valarie and I certainly endeavor to play is to help people facilitate, people finding the resources, finding the strategies, finding the solutions where there are issues, where there are problems, coming together. This is that collective sense of us coming together and recognizing that no one person has the answer, but that, together we can we can first of all coalesce a level of power, and then take that power. This is where kind of the bridge with the Black Voter Guide and let me talk about the Black Voter Guide project, because it has expanded and evolved beyond just the guides. So this is where our Black Voter Guide project, which is more of an initiative, a political empowerment, if you will, initiative to help people understand how to get these solutions, how to get to the solutions, how to reach out and speak your voice, exercise your power. A lot of us don't even realize we have power. See, part of being well is recognizing what you have at your disposal, for goodness sake, starting within you. And so that's kind of the fundamental sense of our being well while Black. It's an attitude, if you will. I mean, it really starts with your attitude, your own sense of value, your own sense of wanting to be well. If you don't even know what well, and also helping people understand what wellness looks like. If you've always been sick, and that is your norm, and by the way, as a therapist, I've seen how this looks. When people have grown up in dysfunctional situations, miserable situations, depressive situations, it's hard for them to imagine what it looks like to be happy. They know there's something, they know that they're unhappy, but a lot of them will hang on to the unhappiness because they know that, okay? Mm-hmm. But what they don't know is how to get to happy. And so it is about helping people find their own, talking about faith, their own faith within themselves to realize I can get there. There is a place to get there. So we exercise that we basically encourage people to, again, tap into that part of ourselves as human beings that can believe, dream, imagine, and then actualize, okay? And to let people know, hey, there are strategies, there are solutions, there are resources, and to help guide people.
And to know, that we're not alone. We have always operated in a spirit of community, consistent with what you normally, would define a co-op spirit to be. We don't tell Black people anything. We ask, right? And we are absolutely committed to acknowledging that there are many asks, there are many points of view, there are many ways of having the Black experience. Not just the African American experience, not just the immigrant Black person experience. It could be the Afro-Latin experience, right? But at its root, we're talking about people who are living the life of a Black person, and then saying to that person, pay attention to your well-being. That's number one. Too many of us have been on the struggle bus over and over. We're just riding the route year to year, generation to generation, and struggle becomes normal. I'm okay with, there's an organization in Baltimore called the Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. I'm okay with the beautiful struggle. I'm not okay with being made to struggle at somebody else's hand. If I choose a struggle, if I choose a mustard seed struggle, if I choose a weight loss struggle, if I choose writing a book because I never wrote one before, that's on me, and I'm happy to do that. But what we expose in being data driven, in addition to everything else, is to say, here's the situation that's in outside of your house, outside of you, that's structural, institutional, that has you on the struggle bus. Did you not know? I'll give you a perfect example. One of the things that, and Diane will co-sign on this, one of the things that is widely recognized and known is that all children, when they go into a school environment, whether it's private, public, doesn't matter, thrive when they have a trusted adult in the building. Just a fact. It doesn't have to be a trusted adult in their lives. It could be somebody who's not related to them. It could be the coach. It could be the bus driver, right? Someone that who sees them, just plain sees them in all of their Black glory, in all of their Chinese glory, whatever it is, and then decides to relate to them. Because when things go left, they at least have somebody who will listen to talk to them, no matter what the power is they have. So we know this is a fact, right? But in Montgomery County, we have a situation where at least 4 different research projects have proven, have measured the degree of entrenched anti-Black racism in our school district. So how do these things go together? So Jaquan comes home with grades that you don't understand because Jaquan is intelligent. But somehow he keeps being on the discipline list. He's not on green every day. They put him on red in pre-K. Or he's coming home with, you get a call about, acting out. Or he's not on grade level. You have to connect these two things. 1%, less than 1% of teachers in MCPS, Montgomery County Public Schools, are Black men. Mm-hmm. Do you see the connection? Mm-hmm. If I don't see anybody that looks like me, that intends to understand my Black male experience, I'm less likely to have that trusted adult in the building. And so when things go left, academically, discipline, and behaviorally, who am I going to? That's an example of understanding when the structure of the Black experience, it has you on the struggle bus. And then saying, and you have power to change it. Let's go. Let's go.
Okay. What power do I have, or do we have, to change that in Montgomery County? Less than 1% of the teachers are Black males.
Well, here are two things. Montgomery County has and this is not to focus on Montgomery County. It's to, when you hear me hear me talking about your county, right? But we're different in that I believe we are the 15th largest county school district in the country. That's power. 160,000 students, 32,000 employees. The community speaks 105 languages, and the budget is $3.2 billion. That's a small country. That budget comes from tax dollars. When you understand how tax dollars are allocated to the school system, you understand, so this is where we get into education, the school system is half the budget of the county. Everything else, planning, roads, buses, whatever else, food, services, that's just half. So it's to understand that there's power in those 160,000 students and their parents. Then you have to understand where to exercise your power. You first, one of them is you exercise it at the polls. You elect who's on the Board of Education, who decides who the superintendent is, who decides which programs get support. You elect the county council, who approves the $3.2 billion budget. You elect the county executive, who weighs in on the county budget. You elect the state delegates, who fund a portion of the budget and set the state requirements for science and reading and math. See how it's all connected? I can connect everything to the ballot box. And at the beginning and end of the day, what we have going for us is not dollars, because I could give you some statistics on anywhere on how we don't get paid what other people get paid. It's not dollars. We have bodies that can be moved, and we have votes that we can cast. We don't control media. We don't control money. But those other things, our ability to go to the ballot box and our ability to show up, either not show up and having students or people sit in, walk out, or showing up, Board of Education hearing, county council hearing, writing testimony, writing laws. And part of what we do is help people understand how it works, tell them they can do it, and then help them do it.
Okay. We don't have the money.
Don't have money.
Don't have the money. I think the one that I know of is that in our net worth is like 10% of whites. The average white family before pandemic was $170,000. We were $17,000. But if you were a Black woman head of household, your net worth was negative $6,000. You owed more than you owned. So we don't have the money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But may I weigh in on that, please? Even though education is our primary focus, I have been in the educational arena. I think one of the things in terms of re-educating Black parents around their power within the school system and in that whole legislative process is to recognize, no, we may not have the wealth of white parents, but guess what? Those are our taxpayer dollars. We do have a stake, and therein lies part of our empowerment. That's our power. In other words, Valarie, what's the percentage of Black students in Montgomery County?
About 19%.
That's 19% of the tax structure right there. Okay? In other words, whatever monies the Black parents are contributing, In other words, this is about, again, holding people accountable to our stake. We have a stake in our children's education. It's not that, Black parents, Black folks are not being taxed like what we're being taxed just like everybody else. Okay? And so that's important that we recognize and understand and also appreciate our own value here, at all levels. Our value in terms of how we're contributing to a system that's not serving us.
Mm-hmm. 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 And we can't create money out of whole cloth, right? So in Montgomery County, let me just give you a statistic. The median household income in Montgomery County, everybody think it's wonderful, it's the place to go, it's nirvana, it's, heaven. Black residents, $86,954. That might sound like a lot, and it is a lot. But for the county overall, it's over 118,000. So 86,000 to 118,000. That's a huge income gap. Forget wealth, but huge income gap. And women earn 51 cents on the dollar from men in Montgomery County.
Wait a minute. Wait, hold on.
51 cents on the dollar for men.
Just a little more than half. Just a little more.
Right? So we're not going to make up money real quick, right? But again, we do have bodies. And here's the thing. Do not think that you have to have some kind of degree to write a law. You just sit down and write the law, but you need to understand how the law goes through a system. Who is it that writes the law for the particular thing you're interested in? You don't call the county executive's office to fix a pothole. You don't go to the school board to write a law about educational standards for the state and whether you have to do standardized testing. That's at the state level. You have to understand how it works. Yeah. And so there's a wealth in intellectual wealth and literacy about things that are more than reading books. So what we advance is political literacy, social justice. You got to know the terms, the people, the calendar, all these things. And it might seem overwhelming if you try to do it yourself. Come into community and let's do it together.
That's right.
Okay, so how can I get into this community so I can learn it with you? How do I do that?
Well, first of all, you can go to our website, beingwellwhileblack.org, literally beingwellwhileblack.org. And on that website, not only do you have access to our 2024 voter guides, in fact, 24 and 2022 are there. In those guides are pictures of the people who ran for office, all of their contact information, definitions of what they do. So even getting the guide is a first step. We say this is what a council person does. This is what a clerk of the court does. You can read and educate yourself in one space, right? And educate yourself about the person because they answered the questions from the community. And get in touch with them if you want to ask more questions. That right there is huge. You can sign up on our email list and you will know about our upcoming activities, conversations, educational opportunities, and join the team. Right? Help figure out what we are going to do next. Again, we focused on education exclusively this year in Montgomery County because we had a crisis with the superintendent and we have a crisis still. DC has more of a range of areas because that's what the community there wanted. Prince George's County, we have a team there. And the dynamics are really different. So join the website, download the guides, grab whatever you need, your energy drink, a tea, sangria, I don't care what it is, and invest some time. That's the other piece. Advocacy is a privilege. Mm-hmm. Let's just be real about it. The ability to go to a 2:00 county council meeting, sit there until 3:30 before they call you for a 2-minute testimony is a function of your privilege. Can you get off work? Is someone picking your kid up from school? Is it the elder that you care for going to have cover? It's a privilege. So that wealth and money piece matters because those people who have it have that safety net to be able to be there from 2 to 6 o'clock at a county council meeting. So understand that's a structural barrier to our participation. When we come together in community, what we can say is, listen, I'm going on Tuesday and I need the 3 women that I'm working with in this what we call Black Action Planning Team from BWWB. You got childcare because the three of us are counting on the 3 of you to keep Jaquan, Lisa, and Tom and feed them and do homework while we sit at this county council meeting with our T-shirts and our signs and testimony. That's how it was done before. We have to do that again because the process isn't going to wait on us.
That's right.
That sounds like cooperation.
Come on. Yes.
It most certainly is. And we experience cooperation. Let me say this about two different organizations. Let me mention that too, because I do want to give credit to other organizations that have supported us. A major organization, and I wear dual hats actually as a result, is the Greater DC National Action Network, on which I serve as the Voter Empowerment chairperson. And they have been a wonderful resource of volunteers, because none of us are getting paid to do this, by the way. Talk about cooperation. So all of us who have come together recognizing the importance of this work. The leader of the local chapter of NAN, Sister Nia Tuex, recognized the importance of this work and realized they wanted their organization to be a part of it, and they have been supportive of it with personnel as well as with funds. And the funds that we raise basically are to pay for the graphic design of the guide. In other words, we actually pay that money out to get people to do the things that need to be done so we can get those guides published, and to the printer. The printing of the guide. And we managed this year to raise enough money to print enough guides to make sure all of the DC public libraries get a copy. There's one more library to deliver to, and all the senior wellness centers get a print copy, because we realize not everybody has access to the internet, and therefore we wanted to do our best to expand the access and the availability of the guides in print form. So this is talking about the collective. This is when people recognize and support the common mission and come together on it and lend their support.
And
now, let me comment on that, because you brought up cooperation.
Go ahead.
Let's go to the other side of the coin.
Okay.
One of the challenges that we have faced in doing this work, we faced two that I just want to raise. One is the fact that there is still misogynoir in our community.
What does that mean?
That is a combination of misogyny and being Black. It's the Black female experience. I have literally been told if you're asked to step back so that Black men could be the mouthpiece for the work that we're doing, because they feel more comfortable. I mean, literally. If you look at our teams, they are overwhelmingly Black women. And so back to Stacey Abrams in Georgia and that conversation about Black men, the current conversation of Black men and Kamala Harris, a conversation needs to be had around what is that?
Yeah.
And we are no less colonized in our minds than the white folks who oppress us. It affected all of us. So we have to say, why is this? I mean, turn to any nonprofit Black-led organization, including the church, and just observe the proportion of women and men.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making any commentary on whether it's right or wrong. I'm just saying we're on a different kind of struggle bus as Black women.
Yeah.
And the other thing, so there's misogyny, and the other piece is legacy Black organizations, some of whom have evolved to place proximity to power and adjacency to power ahead of action. We just need to talk about what that is, right? And the degree to which they continue to make themselves relevant to younger and younger people. So some want to cooperate, some don't have the infrastructure to cooperate, some see what we're doing as threatening or radical, threatening to their adjacency to white power, because we come different, we talk different, we ask questions from the Black perspective, right? There has to be a place for all of us.
Absolutely.
But if we don't have a shared agenda where those who think they made it out and came to Montgomery County feel just as compelled to go get statehood and 2 more senators in DC, what we will have is exactly what the system decided to produce, which is a fractured community.
That's right.
And we're just not having it. I told myself, as long as I draw breath, I owe my child a better world than the one I was born into. And it's worse. So we just decided, whosoever will, let them come. We don't talk anybody into anything. If you don't want to be on this particular struggle bus, okay. But I'm going to tell you something. I miss the brothers. Maybe you, Mr. Oaks, have a point of view about that. I'm missing the brothers.
Yeah, I agree.
BeingWellWhileBlack.org is a place to go to get this information. And at the top of the page, you can click I'm going to that right now, to the top of the page.
Yep. So it'll tell you to get your guide.
You
Sign
get
up
your
to
Black
your
Voter Guide. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point, I was very active in the church when I came to D.C. in '86, and I looked up and I was at the church 4 nights a week and on Saturday and Sunday most weekends. And I noticed that women did all the work, and the pastor and the deacons and most of the trustees were men. The leadership position were men, most of the people sitting in the pews were women, and the women did all the work and made the church go. And there was this difference between how the pastor treated women and how the pastor treated men. He knew his source of power were the women. Mm-hmm. The majority of the folks and the people that did the work. I'd have no answers to the question, though. I've asked the question, particularly with Kamala Harris, of black men saying they won't vote for her, or younger black men. I can't get it. I don't understand it. She seems to be, particularly if you look at Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, and compare them, it just seems like there's no choice. It's easy for me. It's easy when you look at who has the intelligence, who has the history, who's looking out for us. It just seems like Kamala Harris should be the answer and the easy answer. So
I think that, so now we need to bring in Dr. Diane Kern. She has the understanding people's minds. She understands the historical perspective. But I'm going to say this. Remember, we talked about being well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. An area of fundamental work is making sure that we are well in the way we think about ourselves. Right. And that literally is some excruciating work of decolonizing our mind. I'll give you one example. I saw somebody on Instagram, I love this, and he often talks about, not necessarily deficit thinking, but a lot of us are in deficit thinking, right? Mm-hmm. But he talks about how he has decided to change the way he talks about the areas, all the social determinants of health, and areas where Black people aren't where we should be, mm-hmm. as defining that as not a Black problem, but a white problem. Mm-hmm. And in particular, when we make progress, he says it's not Black people making progress, it's white people making progress and seeing our humanity and getting out of the way. And that thing changed my mind. Yeah. So, for example, I don't use terms like when we get excluded from things about being blacklisted or blackballed. Mm-hmm. I said, I've been whitelisted and whiteballed. And people look at me like, that's not a word. I'm like, but it is, because the people doing it are not Black. I want to elevate that. Who is the owner of the structure that's keeping me out? So examining where our own minds are.
Absolutely.
Come on, Diane. I'm not
yeah, I agree. Thank you, Valarie, because absolutely, a lot of us have internalized, as you are referring to, this sense of deficiency, this sense of, and sadly enough, some of us feel deserving. Now, that's maybe unspoken. If you were to go directly and tell, they may say something different, but deep down, the way they're behaving, which is why those of us who are thinking, we're like, what are they thinking about? So part of this is the assignment of proximity to what looks like power, as their value. That's what I see. I mean, that's my interpretation. That's the best interpretation I can come up with for what does not make sense on so many other levels. But I agree with Valarie wholeheartedly. A big part of our healing comes from recognizing our value of ourselves and detaching from what was done to us. Let us not let what was done to us define us. Yes. And therein lies the issue.
Thank you, ladies. We're almost out of time. I just want to tell people, go to beingwellwhileblack.org. You can get your Black Voter Guide there. And they've asked in D.C., each of the candidates, whether their positions on health care, education, economic development, civil rights and social justice, housing, and D.C. statehood. Were in Montgomery County, it was all on education because that's where the crisis was. Would one of you, if you have a message, let me ask you, Diane, do you have a message to leave people with?
Yes, to vote like your life depends on it, because it actually does. As we talked about today, every aspect of our lives is governed by these decisions. And I also wanted to add, too, that in D.C. we have the Initiative 83 ranked choice voting open primaries issue, which is on the ballot. That will, if it's voted in, that will change drastically the way people vote. So, folks, look at the resources that are in the guide. please reach out to us. We actually did an educational forum.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much. We'll see everybody next Thursday. Please live cooperatively.
The preceding program was paid for by Everything Co-op.